Ethiopia is standing at a dangerous crossroads. After years of conflict, the country was supposed to be entering a period of peace and political stabilization. But in 2026, new tensions are raising an uncomfortable question. Could Ethiopia be heading toward another major war? The answer is not simple. Ethiopia is not currently in one single nationwide war. Instead, several political and security crises are unfolding at the same time. In the north, tensions between the federal government and forces connected to the Tigray People's Liberation Front have risen again. In Amhara, fighting between government forces and Fano militias continues. In Oromia, armed conflict also remains a serious challenge. And beyond Ethiopia's borders, relations with Eritrea have become increasingly tense. At the same time, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's Prosperity Party has emerged from the June 2026 elections with an overwhelming parliamentary majority. That gives the government greater political power. But political power does not automatically mean political stability. The real question is whether Ethiopia can solve its conflicts through negotiation before another crisis becomes a full-scale war. To understand today's crisis, we have to remember the last one. Between 2020 and 2022, Ethiopia experienced one of the most devastating conflicts in its recent history. The federal government fought the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF, with Eritrean forces and Amhara forces becoming part of the wider conflict. The war caused enormous human suffering, displacement, and destruction. In November 2022, the Pretoria Agreement created a path toward ending the fighting. For a time, the guns became quieter. But peace did not resolve every political disagreement. Questions surrounding the administration of Tigray, disputed territories, the return of displaced people, and the political future of the region remained unresolved. And in 2026, those unresolved questions have begun to create new tensions. That is why the current situation is so dangerous. Ethiopia is not simply dealing with a new conflict. It is dealing with unfinished business from the previous one. The situation in Tigray is perhaps the most serious warning sign. In 2026, political tensions between the TPLF and the federal government intensified. The TPLF rejected the continuation of the federally backed interim administration, and in May, it re-established its regional political structures and took de facto control in parts of Tigray. Then came renewed armed clashes. Reports in August described fighting between TPLF-linked forces and Ethiopian government forces, with both sides accusing the other of escalating the situation. This creates a dangerous cycle. One side increases its military readiness. The other interprets that movement as preparation for attack. More troops move. More weapons appear. Political rhetoric becomes harder. And suddenly, a confrontation that neither side originally wanted can become much harder to stop. The international community has already seen how quickly tensions in northern Ethiopia can turn into a devastating war. That history is precisely why the current developments are being watched so closely. But Tigray crisis. In Amhara, fighting between government forces and Fano militias continues. Fano is not a single organization with one unified command structure. It is a broader term associated with armed Amhara groups that have fought against federal forces. The conflict has deep political roots. Questions over regional power, territorial disputes, security arrangements, ethnic politics, and the role of federal forces have all contributed to tensions. And ordinary civilians are caught in the middle. Fighting has affected communities across parts of the region. While reports continue to document casualties, displacement, arrests, and disruption of daily life. This matters nationally because Amhara is not a peripheral part of Ethiopia. It is one of the country's largest and most politically significant regions. If the conflict continues for years, it could place additional pressure on the federal government and make a broader political settlement more difficult. The danger is not simply another battlefield. The danger is a country becoming accustomed to permanent conflict. Then there is Oromia. The Oromia region is home to Ethiopia's largest ethnic group and contains major economic and political centers. But armed violence has continued in parts of the region, including conflict involving the Oromo Liberation Army. This creates another layer of instability. Imagine a government trying to manage several security challenges at the same time. Resources must be divided. Military forces must be deployed across different regions. Political attention becomes fragmented, and communities can lose confidence that the state can provide security. This is why Ethiopia's current situation cannot be understood by looking at Tigray alone. The country is facing multiple security problems simultaneously: Tigray in the north, Amhara in the northwest, Oromia in the center and west, and growing tensions along the Eritrean border. None of these crises automatically means Ethiopia is heading toward a nationwide war. But together, they create a much more dangerous environment. A single major incident could potentially connect several existing tensions. Now we come to perhaps the most sensitive question: Eritrea. Ethiopia and Eritrea have a complicated history. The two countries fought a devastating border war from 1998 to 2000. Then, after years of hostility, Abiy Ahmed and Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki moved toward reconciliation. That relationship helped shape the conflict in Tigray. But today, the relationship is under severe strain. Ethiopian officials have repeatedly raised the issue of access to the Red Sea and the Eritrean port of Asab. Eritrea, meanwhile, has rejected Ethiopian accusations and has strongly opposed what it sees as pressure over its sovereignty. At the same time, developments involving Tigray are adding another layer to the relationship. This is where the situation becomes extremely sensitive. A dispute over ports or sea access does not automatically lead to war. But when military forces, territorial questions, regional alliances, and unresolved grievances exist at the same time, the possibility of escalation becomes much more serious. A conflict between Ethiopia and Eritrea would not remain a simple border dispute. It could destabilize the entire Horn of Africa. And then there is politics. On June 1, 2026, Ethiopia held its 7th general election. The Prosperity Party, led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, won an overwhelming majority. The National Election Board announced that the party secured 438 seats in the House of People's Representatives. But voting did not take place in Tigray and was also unable to occur in some constituencies, in Amhara and Oromia, because of security and operational challenges. That creates an important contradiction. On one hand, the government now has a strong electoral mandate and greater political control. On the other hand, parts of the country remain outside the normal electoral process because of insecurity. This raises a fundamental question. Can political legitimacy at the national level be translated into peace in regions where armed groups and federal authorities remain in conflict? An election can produce a government. But an election alone cannot solve unresolved territorial disputes, armed insurgencies, or deep political mistrust. That work requires negotiation, compromise, and confidence between opposing sides. So, is another major war coming? Nobody can honestly say with certainty. There are serious warning signs. Renewed fighting in Tigray, continued conflict in Amhara, insurgency in parts of Oromia, tensions with Eritrea, and unresolved political disputes. But there are also factors that could prevent a larger war. Ethiopia has already experienced the enormous cost of the 2022 conflict. Millions of people have suffered from displacement and humanitarian crises. The government has an interest in economic development and political stability. Regional actors have strong reasons to avoid another devastating conflict. And diplomacy remains possible. The most dangerous mistake would be assuming that war is inevitable. But the opposite mistake would be pretending that the warning signs do not exist. The current situation requires serious attention because wars often begin not with a single dramatic decision, but through a series of smaller escalations. A military movement, a political accusation, a territorial confrontation, a breakdown in communication, and then another. That is why prevention matters now, before the situation becomes impossible to control. If Ethiopia wants to avoid another national catastrophe, the most important battlefield may not be a battlefield at all. It may be the negotiating table. First, there must be meaningful political dialogue. The federal government and regional political actors need mechanisms for resolving disputes before they become armed confrontations. Second, the issues surrounding Tigray need sustained attention. The peace agreement ended large-scale war, but several political and territorial questions remain unresolved. Third, the conflict in Amhara needs a political pathway. Military pressure alone may not address the grievances that continue to fuel armed resistance. Fourth, Oromia requires serious political engagement alongside security measures. And finally, Ethiopia and Eritrea need channels of communication that can prevent regional tensions from becoming military confrontation. None of this is easy. Ethiopia is a huge and diverse country with competing political visions and deep historical grievances. But the alternative is far more dangerous. Another major war would not simply destroy military targets. It would damage communities, businesses, infrastructure, investment, agriculture, and the hopes of millions of young Ethiopians. Peace may be difficult, but war is much more expensive. So where does Ethiopia go from here? The country is not doomed to another war, but neither is peace guaranteed. Ethiopia is standing at a crossroads. One path leads toward continued political confrontation, deeper regional conflicts, and potentially another devastating national crisis. The other path leads toward dialogue, compromise, reconstruction, and a political settlement capable of bringing different regions into the same national future. The June 2026 election has given Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government a powerful political position. But power comes with responsibility. The challenge now is not simply winning elections. It is building enough trust for people who disagree with the government to believe that politics is safer than war. Tigray is watching. Amhara is watching. Oromia is watching. Eritrea is watching. And millions of ordinary Ethiopians are watching. They have already experienced what war can do. They know the cost, they know the destruction, and they know that peace is much harder to rebuild than war is to start. So, is Ethiopia on the edge of another war? The honest answer is this. The risk is real, but the outcome is not predetermined. The next chapter of Ethiopia's history will depend on what its leaders and communities do with this moment. Will old conflicts be allowed to become new wars? Or can Ethiopia turn this dangerous moment into an opportunity for dialogue and lasting peace? Because Ethiopia's future is not written yet, and the most important battle may be the one that never happens.